If every human being is born free and equal in dignity and rights, then why are children still being bought, sold, and exploited through sex trafficking? This is a question we all should be asking, as it is happening in every corner of society. And with that, welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About Human Rights, the show where we break down the rights we all share and reveal why protecting them is so critical. I'm your host, Julz Allender, and our organization's mission is simple but powerful: to educate, enlighten, and inspire people everywhere to know their rights, stand up for them, and create a world where human dignity is never for sale. Today we're focusing on human right number 1, which states, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. This right is the cornerstone of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, yet every instance of child sex trafficking is a direct violation of it. Stay with us, because later in this episode we'll be shining a light on what's being done to restore that dignity and freedom for some of the most vulnerable children in our world. But first, let's take a look at what the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says about Article 1. We are all born free and equal. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act toward one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Now let's take a look at a short video about this specific human right.
Can you tell which of these children was not born free? Can you tell which of these children was not born equal? Can you tell which of these children does not deserve to be treated with dignity? We can't either. Human right number 1. We are all born free and equal. What are human rights? Find out at youthforhumanrights.org.
Now let's examine these ideas a little more closely. First, it states all humans are born free and equal. This is a pretty simple idea. All humans, as in everyone that is a human being, are born free, meaning unencumbered by debt or restraint and equal to everyone else. There is no mention of a certain geographical location, race, political identity, or any personal preference. It just says all humans. So just in case you had any doubt, you are included in this statement. You are born free and equal. Born free implies that liberty is not granted, but inherent, challenging systems or practices that unjustly restrict personal freedoms. That one line is the cornerstone on which all other rights are set upon. The next part deserves some time spent digging into it. The right goes on to say, you are born in dignity and rights. Dignity is defined by Webster as the quality or state of being worthy, honored, or esteemed. So all human beings are born with the quality or state of being worthy, honored, or esteemed. A person does not need to earn dignity. It is their birthright. They do not need to prove themselves. A person themselves may believe they can lose their dignity, mostly by mistreating others, but it is not something another can take from them. It is, however, something the individual can deny himself. And the reason I'm emphasizing this particular point is, in our society, people with bad intent try to muddy up this idea. They suggest that maybe some people don't deserve to be treated with dignity, and they will choose the most insignificant quality about another person and use it to justify not granting them the dignity they are entitled to as a human being. The clothes they wear, the accent in their voice, or the color of their skin. These are insignificant qualities when making a judgment about another human being. Some in past history and even today have gone so far as to try and suggest that some people are subhuman, as if there is such a thing, to justify mistreating them. What is important about another human being is how they treat others. Do they contribute to the betterment of society? Are they responsible to their family, their place of work, and their community? And not just in the moment, but over time. Because who among us has not failed at work or in a desperate moment mistreated another? Only by being aware of these qualities can you truly place judgment upon another. And if you find that they are a scoundrel or a criminal, nowhere is it suggested or does it say, so now you can treat them in an undignified manner. No. You are still honored bound to treat them with the dignity that they were born with. It is a truly powerful individual that can treat others with dignity no matter the circumstances. Even if their actions demand that you restrain them, you can at least attempt to maintain some level of dignified treatment. This right, though, goes further and says they are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. What this is saying is that just as another should treat you as an equal and with dignity, it then goes to reason that you should have a conscience and treat everyone else as an equal and with dignity. This recognizes the capacity of every human being to think rationally and morally, encouraging personal responsibility and ethical behavior towards others. It closes the door on reasons you may have for mistreating another. The other point to be made is that you should lead by doing the same. You should set an example by always treating others with dignity. In the wonderful essay written by the 21st century philosopher L. Ron Hubbard, What is Greatness?, he points out, and I quote, the hardest task one can have is to continue to love his fellows despite all reasons he should not. And the true sign of sanity and greatness is to so continue. For the one who can achieve this, there is abundant hope. For those who cannot, there is only sorrow, hatred, and despair. And these are not the things of which greatness or sanity or happiness are made. A primary trap to succumb to invitations to hate. There are those who appoint one their executioners. Sometime for the sake of safety of others, it is necessary to act, but it is not necessary to also hate them. To do one's task without becoming furious at others who seek to prevent one is a mark of greatness and sanity. And only then can one be happy. He goes on later in the essay to say, it is true that beings are frail and commit wrongs. Man is basically good, but man can act badly. He only acts badly when his acts, done for order and the safety of others, are done with hatred, or when his disciplines are founded on the safety for himself regardless of all others, or worse, when he acts only out of the taste of cruelty. To preserve no order at all is an insane act. One need only look at the possessions and the environment of the insane to realize this. The able keep good order. When cruelty in the name of discipline dominates a race, that race has been taught to hate, and that race is doomed. So the real lesson is to learn to love. He who would walk scatheless through his days must learn this I'll give that to you again. He who would walk scatheless through his days must learn this. Never use what is done to one as a basis for hatred. Never desire revenge. It requires strength to love man and to love him despite all invitations to do otherwise, all provocations and all reasons why should not. Happiness and strength endure only in the absence of hate. To hate alone is the road to disaster. To love is the road to strength. And to love in spite of all is the secret of greatness, and may very well be the greatest secret in this universe. The reason I'm reading this to you is, as you travel through life, not everyone will treat you with equality and dignity, but that is no reason for you to do the same to them and be like them. You should stay true to the ideal of this first of our many human rights, that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. And make that an ideal a prominent fact in our culture, as this is the foundation of the justice system, our social policies, and democracy. When it comes to human interaction, this is where you start. And my guest today is Kathy Wilson. Kathy and her organization, New Day for Children, work to give children who have been abused and sex trafficked a second chance at making their own life. New Day for Children provides these children with access to a safe environment to recover in, while funding their education and any medical assistance they may need. And with that, I'd like to welcome back our very special guest for today, Kathy Wilson. Hi, Kathy. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, thank you again for being here. It is always a pleasure, and we learn so much every time we interview you. So let's go ahead and start off, and you can just tell us, I know I give a brief introduction about the organization and the program, but go ahead and tell me about the program.
So we're in our 16th year. New Day started, it was birthed out of Oakland, California. And 16 years ago in the United States, there was very little awareness of children being sold for sex in our own backyard. The conception was that's an over there problem. And so there had been a lot of efforts made, not nearly enough to meet the need, but still a lot being done overseas, in Asia, South America, providing, restorative care for child victims of sex trafficking, being sold commercially for sex, being treated as a commodity. But we still have our heads in the sand collectively in the United States when it comes to this issue, but it's a whole lot better than it was. So when we started, and we partnered with another nonprofit to create a long-term care facility, care home for child victims in California. We were one of just a handful in the country that was doing that work. And now today, there are new programs for these kids that are starting up all over the country. So it's very encouraging to see the progress that's being made. So when we started this work 16 years ago, we were one of just a handful in the United States that was working with this population, American children who had been sold for sex. And we were focused on the ages of from 10 to 18. Now we have a few different wonderful programs in the state of Texas, Louisiana, Washington State just getting opened up, a lovely home in Tennessee in a beautiful rural setting, Colorado, and soon to be a partner program in Ohio. So we have all these different places that we're able to help place children and facilitate their care and their recovery. And we now, our program in Louisiana is now licensed to take care of children starting in infancy, because unfortunately there is a need for that. There was a toddler who was presented to New Day as needing restorative care from sex trafficking, and there was nowhere in California for this toddler to go for this specific kind of healing environment. And so our Louisiana program, the state of Louisiana actually adjusted the licensing for that beautiful program there to enable them to care for 0, I think it's now through 22-year-olds that they can take care of. So we have programs all around the country who will take kids from different states. And our goal is to have one in every region, to make it easier for the kids to be closer to home, for parents to come and visit. So we're just thrilled that so many people have really taken this seriously and have crafted wonderful places, have learned from the pioneering agencies, and a lot of mistakes have been corrected. So all of these care facilities domestically are just getting better and better, and working with trauma informed therapists and providing appropriate care for these children. And we're helping to come online now a little ranch for boys, for boy victims of sex trafficking, because they have been the neglected and forgotten group. It's usually still, when I go to workshops, when I go to symposiums about this, it's women and children, women and girls, women and girls. And it just drives me nuts, because some people estimate that boys could make up as many as half of the victims of this crime.
Wow.
And so we are now going to have the first long-term care restorative program for boys opening in Colorado. Hopefully that is going to get going this year, but possibly in 2026. So that's something that we've hoped and prayed for a very long time. So really excited to see that almost coming to fruition.
That's excellent. The expansion is incredible, obviously much needed, in that that many more women, children, both male and female, and young men are going to be able to be helped. So incredible.
Right. So when they come into the programs that we partner with, they're comprehensive, and so they get back on track educationally. They get normal childhood experiences, field trips, excursions, outings, learning to cook, learning to do chores, learning to do their laundry, just a lot of basic life skills, and therapy, because it's a long process to recover from. Unfortunately, sex trafficking is a horrible reality, and so we've cared for kids who've been victimized thousands of times in unspeakable ways by many, many different people. And so you can't just take a band-aid approach to that. And that's a lot of, I appreciate anything being done for this population, but they really need very deep, intensive care to heal from their trauma, to come back into a sense of who they are, and to move forward in their lives with healthy patterns, not falling back in to victimization, to what's become familiar to them. Some of our kids, this has been the only life that they could remember since they were very little children. Usually the average age that they come to us is around 12 and 13, but we've cared for many, many kids it's been their whole lives since they were babies or toddlers, unfortunately. And
can I just, on that point, because when you talked about the licensing needing to be changed to be able to care for someone who's being sex trafficked, sexually abused before the age of 1, because you said 0, it's shocking.
It is. It's very shocking. We want to turn away from it. It's, people, there's a natural human response to, I don't want to hear about this.
Right.
It's just too awful, too disgusting. Kind of want to just, fortress off your kids and your family and retreat into your own home and just have pizza and watch a movie and not think about it, and hope that that your kids will be safe that way. But
is there a common denominator with that of who is doing this to children of that age? Like family?
they're okay. So I would say out of the 135 kids that we've now worked with, and on the average, they're with us for 15 months, but sometimes, if it was a family member, if they don't have a safe place to go back to, we've had kids who've been with us going on like 8 years. So it happens increasingly every which way that
Okay.
think the storylines are also different. So some kids are trafficked by family members, um, sometimes sold by a parent for drugs if the parent has addiction issues. That's often when the kids are sold at a very young age. It's often that's the scenario. Maybe the mom has a crack addiction, or or the family, it's familial, going back generations. This is just, grandma was in the life of prostitution and the kids were introduced to that, and maybe there's a few uncles who are pimps, and so there's that. It can look like that. Increasingly, just because of the internet and the connectivity now around the world, so it's an international crime against not just children, against people, of all ages, men, women, people of any age can and are being sold for sex. And unfortunately, the internet is, here we are. So it's a blessing. We're able to use this technology for good and to get the word out, around the world. As we sit, in our own little places, we can get this needed message out. And that's a good thing. But it's also been kind of like a Pandora's box, and made all people with nefarious purposes and driven by greed. There's a lot of money to be made off of selling human beings, trafficking human beings. So people are trafficked for organs. The
Right.
Black market for organs is just booming, and that's again facilitated by ease of transportation. The world is just smaller, now, as our technology opens up more and more avenues to us and more places. So there's that. There's labor trafficking, and then sex trafficking is the fastest growing component. And so you have in other countries, a lot of times it's for survival, and things are more culturally accepted. Things have happened for generations, for centuries, this way. So human rights have improved in many parts of the world, but still it's barely under the surface. So you have Europeans and Americans traveling to places in South Asia, and everyone knows that these child brothels are there, and you'll have scantily dressed kids wandering around on the streets giving out cards, go here, showing people where to go. So it's no secret. It's really right out in the open in a lot of the world. That's what it looks like. And you've got the Philippines. There's a huge problem of familial trafficking there, where there's a prevailing attitude of, well, if it's happening online, that's not so bad. And so children will often be sold in that way, marketed by family members online. And then America is the largest purchaser
Right.
of all that. So see, we're so connected now. We're all in this together, for better or worse. And sometimes people want to make it a male-female thing. Around the world, most of the purchasers of people for sex are men. But when it comes to kidnapping, luring, enticing, selling, women are just as much a part of the picture. So you can't, it's not this dichotomy of bad men, good women. And sometimes men are some of the real heroes of rescuing these kids.
Right.
And getting them out of their predicaments. So, it's increasingly it's anybody and everybody who's involved. And when they do stings and when they do break up the networks of people who are, either purchasing kids in person or purchasing online, viewing of an actual child being raped, but it's on their computer screen. To me, I don't see a difference because that child is being trafficked. It might be on a screen, but it's no different. Someone is doing the raping of them in a place somewhere on earth. And so, there was the movie Sound of Freedom, and that shone a light on how it happened, that time with those children in that setting. Some people reacted to that movie saying, oh, this is sensationalized, this isn't what it typically looks like. Well, I would really push back against that because that movie really opened a lot of people's eyes for the first time
Yeah.
to the reality of children being sold for sex. And that's what it looked like in that case. That was a true story. And there you had a woman who was she was like a beauty queen in her country in Central America. And that's how she was able to lure these kids with promises of, becoming celebrities and models. And then I think a really good thing in that movie is that one of the people who helped to rescue these children and break up this, huge ring that was going on in that country was a man who before had been a purchaser of these children. He himself had been part of the problem. So when you alluded in your introduction to the fact that we all have a conscience, and not hating people that are doing evil things, even though they do need to be brought to justice. That was a really wonderful aspect of me to that story because it showed that man, he had the choice to change. And he was just making it non-personal. He was just saying, oh, well, this is what they want to do. This is how they make money. This is a way for me to find, gratification and pleasure. When he looked into the face of this child and saw that she wasn't an adult, she was a teen, she was, underage, and he was pierced in that moment to the point of feeling suicidal, but that he'd participated in that kind of exploitation. But then he decided to atone for what he had done and to help work and fight, against this evil. And he did. And he made a huge difference. And I'd say that that is something that's really captured my heart in the 16 years of working for New Day, because we've had many prisoners behind bars who have learned about New Day and what we're doing, and they've done fundraisers for us from inside prison. They've done frozen yogurt sales, they've done walkathons, pizza sales, and presented us with very large checks. They make very little money behind bars, in their endeavors, but we were given a check for like $24,000 at one of these prisons. And when I went to accept a check at one of these places, they had me speak at their chapel for about 300 male inmates. And if you'd ever told me I would be doing something like that, I would have said you were crazy, because I've always had an issue with fear, so that I've had to push out through my comfort zone. But afterward, one of the guards came up to me and said, we have a young man who'd like to talk with you one-on-one if you're comfortable with that. And we went into a quiet corner, and he started crying, and he told me his story. And he had been sold by his mother, who was a drug addict, for sex since about the age of 4. And I asked him, how many people have you been able to talk about this with and to share this with? And he said, only in the past 2 months. You're the third person I've ever talked about. And, just a whole lifetime of trauma. And here he is in prison. There's a saying, hurt people hurt people. And he was just a sweet Hispanic guy in his early 20s. And He said, when you were speaking in chapel, my friend I had told, I thought I had two friends in here that I could talk about my life with and my story. And he said, one of them was sitting behind me. And when you were sharing about these girls and what they go through, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, does this just sound like your entire life story, what she's talking about? And he said, now I feel like when I get out of here, I have a purpose and I want to help boys who've been hurt the way I was hurt, and to help them find some hope and realize that they have dignity and that they're not garbage, they're not worthless. So that conversation was one of the something in my life, that I will always remember. And just, you alluded to the dignity of all people. And so this young inmate had had his dignity stripped from him his entire life.
Right.
You know, sold by his own mother for sex. This is what it looks like, and yet, he found his voice, and he found hope, and a purpose for making something out of the terrible thing that had happened in his life, for helping to bring comfort to other people. So I think as an agency, that's what we strive to do, is to shine light into this dark, topic, into these dark places, and help to bring hope, to empower, come alongside, help people get on their healing journey. So that's what we do. We walk with these children on their healing journey.
Yeah, what an incredible story. It's you see the dwindling spiral of, the mother sold him. He was, whatever happened to him, and he obviously became a criminal to some degree and ended up in prison. So you have that dwindling spiral. But if you look at, what is this? I think we can all agree that our modern day prison system doesn't really rehabilitate, right? I just think that that's a pretty common sense idea when you look at recidivism rate.
Yeah.
But what he got his sense of self-respect back. And when individuals do that, like dignity, like you said, they got themselves back. So what an incredible story, to know that inmates, want to make a difference, right? And I think that's where you see that people are in nature, they're good. People are good. You obviously can have some bad actors, and you can make mistakes and you can do some awful things, but innately there's a goodness to people. And the environment speaks loudly on how one exemplifies that or not in their lives. So, that was very touching, Along those lines, there seems to have been an increase in awareness of child sex trafficking since the last year. You mentioned the Sound of Freedom. In the United States, we've obviously had some media surrounding it with different cases and things of that nature over the last couple of years. Has that helped you or in your organization in any way?
It has, because we were always, especially when we first started and it was not being talked about much in the media, people thought we were exaggerating the problem. And so, yeah, the more publicity, the more, stories that come out of what this looks like, it does let people know, okay, this is real. This is happening. A downside of it is, I've seen this tendency to want it to just be about, there's almost kind of a gotcha mentality. There's some real rabbit holes of websites you can go on the internet where any famous person, celebrity, actor, politician, they want to make them a horrible person, the whole Pizzagate thing,
right?
Which, thinking people in Congress were selling children for sex in the basements of pizza parlors. And it was, there are a whole lot of conspiracy theories out there about it. And we sometimes as humans, we have this tendency to want to um, put people up on pedestals and idolize celebrities, beautiful people, the glitterati, but then also there's a desire to see them topple and, to catch them up and, oh, they get their just desserts. And I'd have to say, yes, there are some very wealthy people like Epstein, who do these nefarious things, but sex trafficking is very democratic
Right.
in the sense that it's not just people with a lot of money um, doing this. We have kids who have been taken to fields and sold at a very low price point to field workers. Okay. It can happen in that type of setting and all the way to being flown out to New York to a penthouse, you know, and marketed to someone who has power and influence. So it's high and low.
Right.
In inner city, poor urban neighborhoods, you can have brothels that are going on in a house that just looks like any other house, and it's not this very word of mouth kind of thing where women and kids can be locked in that house and sold in 15-minute increments for $30 for 15 minutes. So it's at a price point that people can afford, poor people. So it's not just rich people preying on
Right.
it's everyone. And again, when they do these stings, who are they catching up? There's firefighters, there's people who work at the local grocery store, there's a church pastor, coach. It's kind of anybody and everybody who gets caught up in purchasing people for sex. And again, back to the downside of our technology. We have to talk about the role of pornography. Pornography is the gasoline on the fire of child sex trafficking, because it's not just like Playboy, porn. Anything that a person gets curious about, and again, the rabbit holes that people can fall down into. There's horrible, horrible stuff out there in the pornography market. And so people, honestly, who never would have done these kinds of things before, 20 years ago in this country, it never would have entered into the person's mind
Right.
to try a child for sex. But people's consciences have become seared because they're watching so much online, and you can go on the dark web and they're seeing people raped, they're seeing people tortured, they're viewing rooms and clubs for this kind of thing. So feeding the darker side of our human nature.
Right.
So we have to all fight against this collectively and acknowledge, okay, as humans we have choices and we have power and we do have agency over what we choose to do, and we have to put the brakes on ourselves as a species when it comes to to what we're consuming and where we're letting curiosity take us online.
Right.
And that's what's happening is you have nice people, good people who are going on these porn sites, and then it's like, oh, they see something flash up on the side, oh, I can watch this. I can see something like that. And, keeping on upping it and eventually ending up watching very hardcore things, including child pornography. And so it's just feeding, becomes addictive to people. And then, sometimes they want to act that out in person, what they've been consuming, what they've been, becoming addicted to. So,
Yeah, it's, you bring up a very, very valid point in terms of, obviously sex is a I don't want to say toxic. It's a very stimulative topic, and it obviously stimulates something in individuals. can't say that all individuals, but obviously a large enough number of individuals that that grabs them, and controls them, and almost pushes them to it's like drugs, right? And I've heard, individuals talk about how it is an addiction very similar to drugs. But you've talked to a drug addict or someone who got involved, right? The gateway drug typically is marijuana, right? Alcohol, marijuana, cigarettes, nicotine, and they need a higher hit, right? The high's just not quite high enough, right? For whatever reason they started, right? Now they try the next one, and now they try the next one, and now they try the next one. And it kind of seems to operate in that same way where,
It does.
yeah, you just it just sucks you in, and it grabs a hold of you, and it obviously you're not under control.
Right. That's right. And so the children, because they don't have power to really fight this, we have to get the message out, this is happening. It happens in dark, shadowy, hidden places. So people aren't always aware of it. And it's not that everyone needs to, dive into all the nitty gritty of, how it's all happening. It's a horrible topic. It's a horrible thing. But we need to know that it is, and that children are being victimized in this way, and to use our voices, speak out about it, take a next step, read a book about it, take a next step, find an agency that you can support, that's doing right, send a check, there are many wonderful nonprofits and agencies that are fighting child sex trafficking besides New Day. So, do a little research and take it to that next, place, because, and again, I'm so thankful that has been happening. And in America, again, there are more and more wonderful places to help rehabilitate these kids opening up every single year. So the word is getting out, thanks to people like you, and the media covering it more. And I get invited to go speak at spaghetti dinners and pancake breakfasts and Kiwanis clubs and Seroptimus and Rotary. And so that's what we need to do. That's the community in action. Civic groups, church groups, synagogues, mosques, are wonderful when they have us come and speak, and don't shy away from this, again, because it's the topic of sex. But we need to be talking about this in our faith communities, and in our faith communities, doing things that we can to educate,
Right.
and to help. It takes all of us.
Right.
It
Right.
takes all of us to fight against this.
Right.
And here, and because we are talking about our children and our kids, and they deserve a childhood, they deserve their innocence, they deserve, everything that you talked about, in your intro, what you guys stand for. Children deserve that.
Yeah.
And in the adult community, we should all be, doing our utmost to try to give all children a healthy and whole and happy childhood. And there's nothing worse, really, that you can do, to a child than to introduce sexuality, intrude upon their personhood in this horrible kind of way, short of killing them. Just really nothing worse that can happen to a child. So since it is happening to so many children, estimate hundreds of thousands of kids in this country being victimized as we speak, we just have to keep fighting against it, and
Right.
keep shining light
Right.
into this dark reality, and not turning away because of the yuck factor.
Right. Right.
Like,
Yeah. Absolutely.
it's on us as adults.
Yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. Everyone's
Okay.
the ability to confront evil needs to rise tremendously, and be able to observe and know that this does happen. So one last quick question here. Do you think that a child, if educated about their human rights, could fight back, or is it a bigger problem than that?
Well, education is really critical. So, and a lot of the kids that we have worked with, they're their own healing agents, and change agents, and they're making wonderful decisions, and they're getting on track educationally. We just had one of them, speak at our annual dinner. She's a graduate now. She's in college, and she wants to do this kind of work, help kids who've been traumatized, like she. So I've spoken in lots of schools and Girl Scout troops and sororities, and with the intent of educating for prevention, preventing kids from needing our program in the first place. So when I have been in high schools and middle schools, I have had kids come up afterward and tell me their stories.
Wow.
This has happened to my sister. This happened to my cousin. This is
Right.
happening to me. So it's so widespread, and education is critical. So
Right.
I would like to see all 50 states in our country have this mandated as part of the curriculum. We now have that for safety for typical child abuse,
Right.
safe, all that type of thing.
Right.
I would like to see age appropriate requirements for child sex trafficking also, because unfortunately it's just needed, and kids are so much all about their phones and their
Right.
social media, and they're being targeted actively,
Yeah. Yeah.
in those places. So they need to know how to protect themselves, and they can help save the life of another child. So yeah.
Absolutely. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and again, what your organization does. It's incredible. Your success rate is incredible. So continue forward, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Julz. I look forward to the next time.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you learned a tremendous amount about this evil, and that you now have the ability to look at it and know that it exists, and potentially it is existing in your community, and something needs to be done about it. But with that, until next time, I will see you then. Thank you.